Hey everyone, so something that I recently realized about myself is that I am a lot more productive when I'm working on several projects at once or at a time. By that I mean, if I have to start a drawing or a video and finish it all the way through before I start another one, it's really hard for me to complete that. I still will push and do it, but I've realized that taking a break from that and then working on a different video, or taking a break from that drawing and then working on a different drawing, helps me to give my mind a break because, with drawing I have artist block a lot. So sometimes I'm stuck on where I want to go with the picture. Rather than forcing myself to come up with an answer, I'd rather just work on another picture. Take a break from that, move to the next one. And again, it may take me a while to finish them all, but then they'll all be finished at the same time, and then I'll have like 5 pictures lined up, for example. Same thing with videos. If I start one video, stop it, and then start another one, and stop that to then work on another one, and then come back and just go between that, then I don't have to feel tired. So I'm gonna start doing that. I am still going to be talking about all the art videos that I said I was going to be talking about. I'm literally in the middle of editing them now. But talking about art and only art is probably going to be not only sad for me, but for you all as well. I'm sure you'll be like, all right, that's your 5th art video, Kurena. You're going to put up another art video, But rather than cram all the subjects into like a 2-hour long video, or picking and choosing which one I want to put up, or just putting up fucking 6 art videos back to back, I would rather give you guys a break and me a break. So I'm going to try to talk about anything else, maybe shorter topics, maybe not. I don't know yet. I have so many things I want to talk about, and this is what I'm deciding to talk about today. So today I want to talk about redundancy, which goes back to the subject of video editing for me. I was watching a 20-minute clip from a podcast of a woman who was commenting on an issue, and she spent the entire 20 minutes repeating the same 4 points. And it started off with maybe 3 points that she just kept repeating, and then she added in like 1 extra, but then continued to repeat that and added in like 1 more. And by the 5-minute mark, she had made her point, but went on. And it almost sounded like she was repeating the exact sentences. She sounded kind of like an NPC or something. And so I was sitting here and I was like, did you really have to, you didn't want to stop? You didn't want to edit it out or anything? Like, I was just in shock that she couldn't hear the redundancy. And, I still understood that that's a common thing that I see in so many videos. I've mentioned this before because humans just speak repetitively. Even in real life, I notice this. I'll have a conversation with someone and they'll say the same thing. How most YouTubers that I watch, and, especially with live streamers, but a lot of people who heavily edit their videos still repeat points all the time. A lot of people on the outside who are just commenting are like, oh, you just like the sound of your own voice. That's why you repeat yourself so much. I hear people say that to me a lot. They're like, you're so redundant, I can't stand it. But they're fine with people that they're fans of being redundant. I talked about it in this video where a fan of Markiplier, the most redundant person I've ever seen on YouTube, they love watching his videos but couldn't stand me repeating myself far less than he ever does. So it's a hypocritical thing. They really just hate when certain people are redundant, because if you hate a certain person, you hate everything about them, whether it's right or wrong or neutral or whatever. But it didn't change the fact that I have continued to notice from all the scrutiny that I've gotten for being redundant that a lot of people are. So another reason that I forgot to put in here as to why people leave in so much redundant stuff in their videos is something that goes without saying, but trying to cut that out takes time. So with that woman, for example, the time it would have taken her to edit the video so that it was less redundant would have possibly been 10 times longer than it took for her to originally edit it in the first place, because she would have had to pick and choose which parts to leave in. She would have had to switch things around and figure out what combination sounds more powerful or convincing than the other, which means she'd have to listen over and over again to make sure that the video still flows properly after she does all of that. And that brings us to the next reason, which is if you were as redundant as she was, and you could have edited down a long video into like a 5-minute video, not only does that waste time for you, which especially for podcasters can limit how many edited podcast segments you can put up in a week, but then you get less watch time on YouTube. And so I came to this idea because I was thinking about how podcasters are known for getting paid a lot. And so I thought to myself, well, it probably wouldn't feel like a podcast segment if it was just a 5-minute video, now would it? And why is that? Well, like I said, it make her less money. So I'm sure that many YouTubers think to themselves, well, my supporters don't mind and it makes my videos longer, so why cut out something that's good for business? So that might not apply to everybody, but it's definitely a factor for many. All right, now back to whatever I was talking about. I tried to think about why I was like that, because despite the fact that it is a normal human thing when you're creating content on a platform like YouTube or TikTok to repeat yourself, despite the fact that it happens everywhere, I was like, well, why am I doing this? Because I like to dissect human behavior, as anyone who's watched my videos for a short amount of time would know. One thing that I already knew and I've already talked about is that when you have to argue with idiots all the time who are hard of hearing and they don't listen to shit you have to say and take you out of context all the time, you're going to start repeating yourself because you're like, hey, if you didn't hear me before, I said this. Oh, you might not have understood it that way. I'll repeat it in a slightly different way. So when I'm addressing everyone in like my videos, if I feel like it's something that's going to be twisted, I'll usually repeat it a second or a third time just through instinct because I'm like, oh, they probably didn't even hear me say it. A lot of people who are hard of hearing, or so to say, really just don't care or don't understand where I'm coming from. So yes, I understand that repeating myself isn't going to help them to understand it any better, but that's just like human instinct, you know, because what we've been taught since we were children, that most people are doing their best. So since you have that ingrained into your head, you naturally are like, well, if I just explain myself some more, they'll get it, right? You have to go against your basic fucking instincts and remember, this person's crazy and they're just gonna stay crazy most likely. It's better for me to not waste my breath, and if they choose to listen to me, that'll be their own choice. This is a video. They can come back and rewatch it if they choose to open their mind. That's one factor of where the redundancy in my videos can come from. But another really big factor that I've recently noticed is something that's completely foreign to people who don't make videos. And honestly, it's something that I think a lot of creators don't even pay attention to themselves. Now, some of them may not be me and may not have this experience, but I personally struggle with ADHD. That's a whole conversation within itself. But creating content is not as easy as it is for other people. And yes, I've been diagnosed with it. I'm going to try my best to explain it now. Imagine I'm talking about any topic and I say, a certain point on that topic. Now I got to go and edit that point. But let's say that I did a topic where I talked for 2 fucking hours, right? Because I have a lot to say. I have a lot of thoughts in my head. I want to get it all out, or else I won't feel satisfied with it. That's a whole other conversation, but I have to get all the thoughts out, or else the video won't feel complete. And people have told me that they also like those videos where I dissect things, to a fine point and stuff. So I think it's also good for my channel. The point is, that's not going to go away. I've tried to sum up my points from a 2-hour video into like a 10-minute one. I can't stand it. I don't like the way it comes out because there's just so much I want to say that's missing, which is why I try to do TLDRs now and stuff. Whole other conversation. The point is, I gotta sit here and edit a 2-hour fucking video. That means I gotta listen to myself talk for 2 hours. But it's worse than that, because if you're editing a 2-hour video, you're gonna take 10 times longer to fucking edit it. Why? Because now I gotta listen to every sentence and cut out all the little breaths, all the pauses, the stutters, all these big gaps where I'm speaking. And I also have to make it flow in a way where it sounds like I'm having a fucking conversation. Because the thing is with editing, if you cut out a breath too far, then your whole sentence just sounds choppy. Like the sentence that I just said, if I edited that terribly, it would sound like this. Then sentence sounds choppy. Like, that would be awful if I did a whole 2-hour video like that. Oh, well, I mean, that. Like, no one wants to hear that. So what you have to do is cut the breaths out and then go back and listen to make sure that you did it properly. Make sure that there's not too much space so that you hear the but there's not too little space where there's no gap in between your words. So as I'm editing along and listening to it, then I have to curl back and listen to pieces of the sentences. So the way that it works is that, let's say that in a single sentence, I take 5 breaths, right? Maybe let's say 7, okay? It's a long ass sentence. When I get to breath 3 or 4 of cutting it out, I go back to the beginning of the sentence to listen, because if I didn't do that shit right and I go on to edit breath 5, 6, and 7, now I gotta undo 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, and redo 2. That's so much work. I would rather just stop at breath 4, go back and play the beginning of the sentence, make sure that's fine, then do breath 5, 6, and 7. And then after that, I gotta listen to the whole sentence again, because maybe the way that I edited breath 1, 2, 3, and 4 didn't flow right with breath 5, 6, and 7. So the sentence could start off sounding normal and then like running together at the end. Or maybe I thought that it sounded normal in the beginning, but now that I've edited breath 5, 6, and 7 and it sounds good, the flow of that was better than breath 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I might have to undo the whole sentence and re-edit them again. I don't know any better way to explain that to you, so hopefully that made sense. But let's say that it's worst case scenario and it was the last option I just gave you. Okay, 1, 2, 3, and 4 do not sound as good as I thought that they did. I gotta fix that because that sounds fucking awful. So now I gotta undo all this shit. Okay, let me listen again. I've just listened to myself say the same sentence like 3 times. Now imagine me having to do that for 2 hours. And that's just one other scenario. Another common thing that happens. I'll say the start of sentence 1 well, but the second half of that sentence sounds like shit. So I'll have to repeat it. As I'm recording, I can tell, oh fuck, I just like bit my lip or something. So I'm like, all right, let me do it again. Sounds like shit again. So I do the whole sentence again and again. Sometimes I have to say a sentence like 8 times before I get it right and I'm not stumbling over my tongue. So then when I go in to record, by the time I finish recording, even if you record for like 15 minutes, I'm not gonna remember which fucking sentence was the good one after having to do that for several other sentences. So now I'm gonna have to go back and listen to every version of this shit and pick out the good one, and 2 of them will sound good, but one I think sounds better, so let me listen to those. I've just listened to me say the same fucking sentence like 18 times. I finally pick out 2 that sound good, and then in some cases I can't even pick one of them. Sometimes the first half of repeat 3 sounds good, but the second half sounds like shit. And then the second half of repeat 8 sounds good, but the first half sounds like shit. So then I gotta like stitch them together and make it sound just right and make it like flow as if it's one sentence. I do that in almost every video that I put up, especially the long ones. Sometimes I do it multiple times. And to do that, you have to cut it at the very specific part. Sometimes in the middle of a word, like if I'm saying figuratively, maybe right when I say the word figuratively, the next part of that sentence, like midway through, I stumble on figuratively and the whole sentence falls apart. And then maybe with the repeat 3, at the beginning of figuratively, the whole sentence was shit, but right in the middle of the word, the whole sentence came together. So now I gotta find some sound in figuratively that I can cut and make it sound like it's all part of the same sentence. So as I'm doing that, I'm listening to myself say figuratively, figuratively, over and over and over until I finally get it right. And I'm like, good. Now I got to listen to the whole sentence again to make sure that that sounds good. I'm like, okay, gonna do that. Gonna put that in there. And then you know what I got to do? Now I got to listen to all those fucking breaths that I had to edit out in those 2 sentences. And then play the whole fucking sentence again. So I've just listened to this one sentence like 30 times after listening to repeats of the sentence 18 times. So that's like a total of 50 times I've had to hear myself say the same fucking thing. And it happens not non-stop, but it happens often enough to be a common thing. And then another thing that I do is that after I've edited like 5 minutes of a video, I just listen to the 5 minutes of it to make sure everything sounds okay, or trying to make sure it flows all right, or make sure I didn't leave out any information. If I'm animating, that's a whole nother thing. After I edit all the audio, I got to start animating the fucking video, so I got to hear myself talk some more. And what if I leave out a point? I'm like, oh, let me add an extra recording in there. So I'll like record a piece, put it in. Now I got to edit that and listen to myself say the same shit I've already said. And after a while, it's just noise. I don't even care what I'm saying anymore. Like, the funniest part of all this is that people are like, you just love the sound of your own voice. You're so fucking narcissistic. You just can't bear to not hear yourself talk every second of it. And it's like, I literally can't stand hearing myself speak. It's torture, okay? Like, I'm making videos. I do this multiple times. So that means on a weekly basis, on a daily basis, really behind the scenes. But if I put out videos every week, that means that I had to sit there and hear myself on repeat for God knows how long to make that fucking video. Then I got to do it again and again. And when you do that for so long, that adds to you getting tired of hearing your own fucking voice. I'm sure there's plenty of YouTubers out there who love hearing themselves talk. There's plenty of YouTubers out there who don't even edit their own videos, so they don't have to go through this. They have some fucking fan who can't get enough of their voice editing the shit. That's fine. But for me and anyone who's like me, I'm just like, oh, Jesus Christ, when is this gonna be over? But I just gotta keep going. And it gets so bad because, especially when I'm going into an extensive topic, like when I was talking about all the different perspectives of AI that people weren't understanding, there's so many things that I think are important to say. Not, oh, I can't wait to hear myself say them. No, legitimate arguments that I think are important for people to understand so that they stop attacking this thing that's not the threat that they think it is. Sometimes I forget that I already set the point, because you have to remember that when I'm watching these videos, I'm thinking the points in my head. Then when I'm recording, I'm saying the points that are in my head, but I might not remember everything. When I then go to edit the video, I have to hear myself say those points again. But what if one of those thoughts that I thought in my head, I didn't fucking say? I'm not gonna remember because I've made so many fucking points at this point. I'm like, did I say it, or did I think I said it? Or did I just think it and I never said it? Am I thinking it now? If I make a part 1 and a part 2, I'm like, did I say this in part 1, or was I thinking it the whole time and I was gonna put it in part 2? Not to mention that when I finish a video, I have to watch the whole fucking thing because there's mistakes in there. There's always mistakes. So if it's like an hour long, I gotta listen to myself talk about the same thing for another hour and not space out the whole time. Again, ADHD. There'll be edits in there like, remember to put this here. And I'll watch it one more time when I put it up. Like while it's premiering, like it's still private, I'll just watch it one more time just to make sure it's right while I'm like doing other shit. I'm okay with it. I'm not saying that, when I say it's torture, I'm not saying the whole thing is torture. Again, there's nuance and everything. There's parts of it that I'm excited to do. I'm like, man, I can't wait to, edit this part. Oh, I think that I did a good job here. Oh, that looks cool. Ooh, I think this point is important. Yes, that stuff comes along. But me hearing the sound of my own voice is not fucking fun. Not to mention the whole phenomenon of like when you hear your own voice, it doesn't sound like what you think your voice sounds like. The way my voice sounds to me is like silly. And I think that goes for most people. So I'm just like, why do I sound like that the whole time? So now I'm listening to a sillier version of my voice say the same thing 1,000 times. And so I know that people have told me, well, just type out what you want to say and then read it. I hate reading. I have said this 1,000,000 times and people still keep suggesting it. It's not an option for me, and I'm pretty sure it goes back to me having ADHD. But let me explain for you why reading is hard for me. The problem is that if I'm looking at certain forms of text versus certain forms of paper, the contrast will distract me. One of the biggest ones for me that are distracting would be black text on a white background. How fucking often do you see that on the internet or in a book? The reverse is also distracting, but not as much, like white text on a black background. Usually it's because it's not exactly white, it's maybe a few shades off, but it's still distracting. What works better for me is like dark gray text on a black background, or like it's even easier for me to read yellow text on a white background than black text on a white background. And it's because it just blends in more. I get less distracted. When it's a really sharp contrast, I will focus on like the individual like curves and lines of the letters and stuff. I don't have dyslexia. I'm just getting distracted by the actual text itself for some reason. I don't know why my brain does this. It isn't even something that I'm consciously doing. It'll just happen. And then not to mention, again, whatever I'm reading can also distract me because of the ADHD. So reading just isn't fun in general. And that a lot of that happens when it's in my head, but I can actually read through stuff in my head. The only problem will be that I might space out while reading it, so I'm reading every word but not retaining it, so I might have to read it again. But having to read stuff out loud is a whole other story, because I guess that has to do with biology as well as the ADHD. Like the way my mouth is shaped, I guess, is a factor. I wouldn't say that I have a really big mouth or a really small one, but I guess just the way that it's shaped mixed with my tongue, and the fact that my tongue isn't super fucking freakishly long or anything, but is a little bit longer than I think average. And it's not really thick and it's not paper thin, but I think due to the fact that it is longer when it's inside your mouth, it takes up a little bit more space. So all that stuff can make it easy for you to like bite your tongue or trip on your words. And especially when you're putting most of your focus on trying to read the words clearly, you're putting less focus on just speaking naturally. Because if I'm just talking to a friend and I stumble on my words, my friend knows me. They know what I'm trying to say. But if I'm doing a video, there's like a third of my focus on trying to actually pronounce the words and say things clearly, speak into the microphone clearly. Then there's like a third of me trying to make sure I articulate everything in a way where people can actually understand what my point is. And then another third of it is a natural thing for most YouTubers, which is, you know what people are going to say when you start relaying things a certain way. So I'm also trying to make sure that I say it in a way that's not going to be taken out of context. I'll say a sentence and my brain will just naturally think, oh, they'll probably twist it into you saying that, won't they? All those things can easily distract you while you're trying to read text. And especially if you have ADHD, it's not easy to just ignore those things. Like someone who doesn't understand it will tell you, oh, just don't think about it. You can't fucking do that. So that's why it's writing stuff down isn't necessarily the answer for me. Anything that you see me read in a video, I probably read it like 8 times to get the sentence out right. So imagine me typing out fucking 14 pages for an hour-long video, 2-hour recording some shit, and then I gotta say that shit 8 times per sentence. That recording is gonna be like 10 hours long. I'm not gonna sit here and listen to myself fuck up a sentence 1,000,000 times every sentence for 10 hours. You're out of your fucking mind. And I understand that people don't know that that's what I'd have to do, but that's why you'll see me say multiple times in a video, I hate reading, because a part of me is venting that I even have to read it in the first place. I'm like, here we go again with the reading thing. And it's like, I look up information. Yes, I do read things, but in my head, where I don't have to trip over my tongue all day. The point is, reading is torture. It is not an option. People have suggested like make bullet points, and that's cool. But again, the ADHD, I can't keep track of all my thoughts in advance. They like come to me in real time. So with this video, for example, I was like, oh, let me make some bullet points of what I want to talk about with editing. My whole brain just went blank. Almost immediately, I had some ideas when I was like, oh, let me record it. And I was like, wait, let me bullet point first. And then it just died. I was like, oh, the only time I can put out points that I want to make is if I'm already thinking of a point to myself, or I'm talking to myself out loud and getting my thoughts out. And then I'm like, oh, well, let me write this down so I don't forget. But for me to just be like, I'm going to talk about this subject and bullet point it out, it just doesn't work that way for me. Crazy as it is. So the point is, coming up with a script is not an option for me, and having to edit and listen to myself just makes me have to hear myself. So it shouldn't be a shocker what I'm leading up to here, but instinctually in your brain, subconsciously, I mean, if you hear yourself on repeat all day long for hours a day over a span of years, I think the brain just gets used to you saying shit in 3s and 4s and 8s and 10s. Whenever you have to explain something, it's like a trigger, and you just go. And so the brain works off of patterns, and your brain likes to, do what it's comfortable with doing. And yeah, the point is, I understand how hearing someone repeat themselves over and over again can be frustrating. When I saw that podcast, I was annoyed at her having to say the same thing, but I'm not stupid enough to think someone wants to be annoying through repeating themselves. They're not doing it on purpose. If they could hear what you hear, of course they would stop themselves, but the brain doesn't work that way. If you're making a good point, I'm like, oh, they're struggling with it, but heart's in the right place. Support. So I'm not saying you have to support me, but I'm just saying I try to have a level of empathy for people who are obviously struggling with something that they clearly are not trying to do to annoy you on purpose. And with that being said, that's where the fuck I'm coming from when I repeat myself. But despite the fact that most people do it, and despite the fact that I said people only hate it when they hate you, despite the fact that it's very contradictory because people who say this shit to me will repeat themselves 4 times in the fucking comment itself, despite all of that, I'm still gonna work on it because that'll just separate my content from the rest. I'm not gonna be perfect. I will obviously repeat myself from time to time, regardless of how much I improve this, because sometimes redundancy is a good thing depending on the context. But I will do my best to limit it anyway, because why the fuck not? I'm always looking for self-improvement. So, thank you for watching. Thank you to anybody who supports me regardless of how fucking redundant I am. And yeah, I'm happy that I know, because I'm getting to know my audience now. Some of you will definitely understand where I'm coming from, and I will say in advance that that means a lot to me. So, thank you for watching. And I will see you all next time. 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 See you all next time.